One of the biggest marketing struggles I hear when I talk to small business owning women is the struggle to find quality, emphasis on the quality, photos and videos to use in their business's marketing. So whether it's a video to go behind some text on your website homepage or relevant images to use throughout the slides for your course, or on-brand images to use on Pinterest graphics. If you're like me, you need images and videos in every nook of your business, and you're probably not doing a photo shoot for every specific photo you need. Also, the free stock image sites likely don't cut it, at least not forever. Those images are often, let's be real, they often feel kind of cheesy. They can often be overused, and they might not actually match your brand. So enter my favorite paid stock photo company, Hotstock. Guys, I have been a subscriber to Hotstock since early 2020, so around 3 years now. You've likely seen me use their images and videos fit seamlessly into my brand on things like my course videos, marketing graphics for this podcast, and even just throughout my website. My team and I are in and out of our Hotstock account just about daily for different content creation purposes. I seriously love them so much. As a Hotstock member, you can quickly download photos, videos, and even marketing templates to use in your business. They have over 8,000 images and videos to choose from, and they're constantly adding more to their library. And I really love that I can use their search function to type in exactly what I need and find it quickly. So you can search for things based on the colors used in the images or videos. So you're I need something with some blue, you can search for that. You can search based on if there are people in the image or not, technology in it or not, and a bunch of other cool search features there. It's pretty amazing. As a Breakthrough Brand podcast listener, Hotstock has hooked you up with a deal to get 15% off your subscription. So use the referral code Elizabeth at checkout to save 15%, or you can visit the link elizabethmccravey.com/hotstock to get that deal as well. And that is spelled Haute stock. So spelled like haute couture, but pronounced hot. So Haute stock. And I'm also linked to that for you in the show notes if you want to just click that there. So go check them out, get that 15% off with the code Elizabeth, and let me know what you think and let me know what images you love. Seriously, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM. My current favorite collection is the Mama and Me collection. I've actually used a lot of those images for promoting my podcast episodes around working mom life, and they fit in absolutely perfectly into my brand. So check out the beautiful photos, the strategic videos, and start downloading the ones that fit your style and get ready to up-level your marketing and business today. Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. All right, mama friends, I believe this episode is the encouragement you need as we kick off another year of business, another year of motherhood, and another year of wearing a lot of hats. So whether you're a mom right now or someone who wants to be a mom in the future, this episode is going to be the encouragement, advice, and different thoughts you need as we start this new year. So I'll be real. As someone who has done business for over 5 years without kids and then now doing business as a mom, it has been a big adjustment for me, especially since we didn't start doing outside childcare until just recently. It's just a huge adjustment. So my business took a step back. I've been feeling stretched thin, and I feel myself wanting to be super present and wear all the hats super well. But I don't always, and I'm gracious for myself in that, but it's been tough at times. Motherhood is this weird combination of so fulfilling where I can't imagine my life without Colin and just adore him and want to be with him all the time. But also can be really hard at times, which is what we're talking about today. So if you need encouragement in your motherhood and business journey, if you're feeling a bit burnt out or a lot burnt out, you've got it right here. So today I'm chatting with Joy Michelle. She's a photographer turned YouTuber and a business coach. She's also a listener, a longtime listener of this podcast. So that's really fun. She's got 2 kids, Clara and Lewis, who you'll hear us talk about on this episode. And she's been married to her high school sweetheart, Felipe, for over 10 years. Joy's she loves sharing all that she's learned from building a business while also being a present mom. And she's someone who I have super loved learning from personally in my first year as a mom and combining that with my business. So today, Joy and I are talking about motherhood and business, obviously, about the ups and downs, struggles, and encouragement and things like productivity, being present, and things like that. So we talk about what it looks like to be called to both, meaning both motherhood and business, and how we can navigate that well. We talk about Joy's work week and what that's like as a working mom and how that's changed over time, the struggle of time management as working moms and tips there and why that can feel so hard to manage your time well once you add kids to the equation, and advice for the mom feeling burnt out on her business or burnt out on motherhood, and a whole lot of other stuff too. We go all over the place and we talk a bit about Joy's business journey as well. So it's a very good conversation. And we actually recorded this at the end of August in 2022. So a few months ago. And honestly, I'm just airing it now to kick off the new year because after the conversation, I was like, I just felt like this would be a great episode to kick off the new year with, the encouragement as we start again, a whole new year, a clean slate, of business and motherhood. So basically I've held on to it since then. So when you hear us reference our kids' ages and maybe a little bit of what life looks like right then, just know that Colin and Clara and Lewis are all a bit older now because this was at the end of August. So I will be re-listening to this alongside you when it airs because again, I need this encouragement again as well. And I just really hope this conversation blesses you and that you can step into your calling gracefully as a mama who feels called to both. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Joy. Okay. Hello, Breakthrough Brand listeners. I'm so excited to be sitting here with Joy, who her podcast has been huge for me as a mom called to both. And I got to be on a compilation episode of hers and just absolutely love everything you teach and your mission of empowering women to know that you can do motherhood and business and how to do it well. And I'm really excited for this conversation. So welcome, Joy.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I've been a longtime listener of your podcast. So this is so fun to be a guest.
Yes, I love it. And yeah, just dive right into it. For people who might not be familiar with you yet, share what you do and who you help, a bit about your family too, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm Joy. I am a believer. I am a mom to 2 little toddlers. So it's a bit crazy around here. And I'm a wedding photographer turned photography business educator and creative business coach. So I've had a YouTube channel for about 5 years now, and then a brand new podcast, which I loved having you on. And I launched that earlier this year. So that's kind of newer. So I help photographers and creatives grow businesses that serve their lives. And a lot of my education focuses on organic marketing, productivity, and just balancing business and life and what that can look like, I think, especially for women.
Yeah, I love that. Businesses that serve their life. Yeah, with that, let's talk about, first, actually, I want to back up a little bit more. Wedding photography was what you were doing. What made you transition? What was that experience like of changing to more education side?
Oh man, so many things. So I actually did a whole podcast episode on this transition and what that looked like. But so many things. First, I had almost unintentionally started another business by starting a YouTube channel and then started educating photographers. And that led to PhotoBoss, which is now kind of its own brand and Facebook group. And I got to this point where I had just Clara, so my firstborn, and PhotoBoss was growing. And I just felt this itch of I really want to see what I can do with my education business. But I started feeling I can't fully do PhotoBoss and I can't 100% do weddings the way that I want to do them. If I'm going to do something, I want it to be excellent. And at the same time, things were shifting and I wanted to be able to make more money from home. And that freedom piece for me of why I started a business became less of the original reason of let's not just commute every day into work. So I started working for myself. It got like one level deeper of like, let's be home more. And so that was really the catalyst behind the pivot, but just so many things. And, after 8 years of weddings, it definitely was, it felt like I had done it, and I loved it. Like while I was doing it, I loved it, but then it started feeling like, okay, what's next? Like, I think there's something more for me here.
I love that. 8 years. Yeah, that's a while. Yeah, with that, like, so I know both of us. So actually let's touch base real quick on our mom situations. Cause again, we're talking to people listening, whether you are already a mom and you are like, okay, how do I make this business thing work? Or, I have a business, I want a business, or you are like thinking about like, I know I want to be a mom at some point. How does work fit into it? Both of us had our businesses before we were mothers, but let's talk about that of like how did your business change when you had your first child, and what did your business look like then, and some of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. This is such a good question. So I will be really honest with you. I was scared to introduce a baby into the mix because I had a business. My business was my baby.
Yeah.
And I had that before I had my actual babies. And I just didn't know where a baby was going to fit into the whole mix, the business, my life. I didn't know. I almost feared that like maybe I wouldn't want to grow a business anymore. And maybe my love for my business would somehow dwindle because I just loved business in general. Yeah. So I had started my business in 2013 when I was fresh out of college, and I started my YouTube channel in 2017. And I kind of consider that to be like phase 2 of business that led to the education business. And I had Clara in 2019. Now, all the while I'm still photographing weddings. And so I still had 2 more wedding seasons as a mom. I did like so many weddings while pregnant and then postpartum. Gosh. So like pumping in the bathroom and just juggling all the things and like standing in a stall, and it's like during the reception. And so a couple of years of that. And that it's definitely still possible to have a wedding photography business and have children. But I think then that transition happened that I mentioned before, where PhotoBoss was growing and I really wanted to see where I could take it. And at the same time, I started feeling like I wanted another baby. And I was like, I think now's kind of the time to make this transition. And I did a couple more weddings while I was expecting Lewis. And I just remember being like, I'm too old for this. I'm too pregnant for this.
Yeah.
But it worked out. So that's kind of like, it was a slow transition, like a pivot of adding on the babies, still doing weddings, adding on another baby, transitioning out, and now doing full-time education.
Yeah. And like you mentioned that you're worried because your business is like your first baby, which I think a lot of people can relate to that. And we use that terminology often of like, we just love our business so much. And you were worried that your business could become less of an interest. Once you became a mom, like, did you experience any of that? Or was it like your business like stayed just as interesting?
I think when I was expecting, I was like hyper focused on my business. It like almost, I had like nesting in the business of like,
let's relate to that so much.
Like, let's get a course out. Like, let's do this. And so that kind of fueled me. I definitely go through every time I've had a baby, I've gone through this, like, I want to be 100% away from the business and just be with the newborn. And so I just like, don't care for like 6 or so weeks. I just don't care. And that's, I think, like proper perspective of like, it's just the business. But then I kind of like something just clicks. And I think with each baby, it's been a different time, but something just clicks. And I'm like, I have ideas again. I kind of want to get back in there. I'm excited about this. And it was overwhelming coming back from my second maternity leave because there's just so much that I had to answer. And I had a team then, and it was overwhelming at first. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And I was like, okay, one thing at a time, we got this. But every time I've always been so surprised that part of me that wants to grow something and build something and create doesn't go away. And now I kind of like laugh at myself for thinking that it would, because it's who I am. Like, of course, it's not going to go. Motherhood adds, it doesn't subtract. and if someone changes their heart and wants to close that business and start something new, like that is 1000% fine. But for me, it gave me new focus, I think, and in a lot of ways made me a better business owner for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I can relate to how you said it. Like you wanted the time where you're like, which I've only had one, which everyone listening right now, let's actually share kids' ages. So Colin's about to be 1. And how old are Clara and Lewis?
So Clara is 3 and Lewis is 1. He's like 15 months.
Oh yeah. Gosh, I forget they're like so close in age there.
They
Yeah.
are.
That's cool. Yeah. So we're both like we're in that fresh one with the second, but I've only had the experience of one. But I know for me on like early maternity leave, I did have some of like not wanting to quit my business, but like it was just like too much to like consider like doing both. And that stressed me out. I was like, wait, like, oh my gosh, am I trying to like quit my business? We can't even do that financially if I wanted to. But you're right. It does like I had once I was sleeping more, not breastfeeding 1,000 times a day, I was able to like think more. And I did have like quick, okay, I'm ready with new ideas coming back into this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You almost have to like take the pressure off yourself. And at first, I mean, there's probably like biological reasons behind it, but it's like, you can't deal with all of that. Like you're trying to stay alive and keep your baby alive. And so, I mean, for me, I see women, jump right back in. I'm like, you're amazing. I don't know how you do that. But I just needed like a full on, like, I do not care. I'm not posting. I'm not checking my email. I just couldn't care. But then it comes back and you're like, okay, it's still there. I still got it.
Yes. I hope that's encouraging for someone listening. Cause I feel like I really needed that encouragement early on that like your business will still be there. Things might change while you're away and that's okay. And like what is right in front of you of like this precious new baby and you also resting, letting your body heal, adjusting, whether it's your first or second, I imagine it's still like, or later, more kids, like there's so much different adjusting to do. So letting yourself take that break and breather.
Yeah. And I remember my midwife telling me that like with each subsequent child, you almost need to rest more because your body is like working really, really hard to go back every time. And I felt that. I was like, okay, I've got to like really not push myself to do all the things or like try to prove that I can almost and be like, I still got it. I'm good. I was just like, I'm going to embrace this time and just lay here.
Yeah.
And so I did.
No, that's so good. And that makes sense though, be more intense as like it goes on with more kids. Yeah. So I kind of already asked you this, but like maybe if you want to go deeper into like differences, again, for people listening who are thinking about like, okay, how does like, I already have my business, let's say if that's one situation, how does each kid like change the business and maybe the way we're working, maybe the hours you're working, your schedule? How would you say it was like when Claire was born first and then when Lewis was born, like transitioning to 2, how your business changed?
Yeah. I mean, it's constantly changing. Like even just this week, my husband and I were like, I feel like we might need to change the schedule a little bit because the naps are changing and their schedules and, whether they're involved in any activities. So like, that is such a real thing. The like constant shifting is such a real thing. So before having kids, I would just work. I don't even know how much I worked. I just worked. If my husband was working late or he was away or anything, if I had an inspiration would strike me, I would pull out my laptop and I could dive into things when the inspiration struck. And that was one of the things that I was like, how's this going to work? And so I had to think about my time and the time that I was spending in my business really critically, I think, for the first time ever. I think I thought I was being strategic, but I had the luxury of time. And I just don't have that anymore. So I could no longer just work in a distracted way. Like, for example, editing photos while watching something on Netflix and like texting a friend. So having less time really forced me to do like an 80-20 analysis of what was bringing in money, what marketing activities were actually leading to leads and conversions, and really sit down and like put on my business cap a lot more often than I put on that artist cap. And it also forced me to grow my team a little bit more. Whereas before I hadn't hired much help as far as like consistent help. I had done like one-off projects or outsourcing a little bit of editing or things like that. So I think that also helped me step into the role of like a CEO and really start thinking about what roles do I need to be in? So, I mean, in the early days, it was Clara in her DocuTot next to me, and I'm just like on the computer trying to get things done and deliver things to clients and respond to inquiries. And she's there. And then I think we brought in, so like my sister used to work for us. And so she did our childcare. And I think we started with just like two different time chunks of like 2 hours at a time or something, like very small. And I just didn't know, like, how was this going to work? So I would work during naps and whenever my little sister would come between her high school classes.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that was the phase back then. And we kind of slowly ramped up more and more childcare. Even now, I only work part-time. But especially when Lewis came along, I knew my business had changed. I really needed some consistent hours. I had one-on-one coaching clients, so I needed those consistent times. And I couldn't just count on nap time, especially for those booked calls.
Yeah.
So then that's when it was like, okay, it's time to get some consistent childcare and make sure that we have some times that I can count on in my business. And that's probably like one of the biggest shifts, is that instead of just working when I felt inspired or when a deadline approached, I'm not even really sure how I was approaching my schedule. It almost feels like a dream, like a long time ago. But now I have to really look and like time block and see my schedule and think about all the things that are coming up. And I think it's just made me a much more organized person. And before I think I leaned a lot more like artist, and I just thought, oh, I can just like, I'll figure it out. And I could be a little bit all over the place. And I think that that's one thing that has actually been so good for me, is that I have to use a project management tool. I have to use, a Slack channel with my team. I have to have a CRM like Honeybook, so that everything is just clean. And I just don't know how I would do it otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. And gosh, I mean, I can relate so much to what all you've said. And it almost like I can so easily forget, even like now a year into motherhood, some of those early things. But like for people listening who are like, oh my gosh, Joy was saying like now she can't work distracted. Cause I know so many people, literally, no matter what you do in your business, if you're a business owner working from home, you've probably done the like friends pulled up on your iPad while you're editing photos or while you're designing a website, or like, and like you said, also texting someone. And it's like, you're doing all these things. And so you could hear that and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose that. But my thought on that is like, life is more enjoyable when we just like focus on the thing and get it done in less time, because it is like, our time expands to how much we allot for whatever that saying is. But like,
yes. Parkinson's law.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like when I can relate to like when I look at time before I was mom, like, yeah, I was never working like 40 hours a week, but I was doing what you're saying of like, yeah, husband's working late. Okay. I'm going to like work on, why not work? It'll be fun. I love it. And you kind of have the TV on in the background and you're eating ice cream. It's like, not that focused.
It like blends into your life. And I think now I have a life to get to. Whereas like before it was kind of all just blended. And I think my husband was fine with it and I was fine with it. And we were in this like feng shui. Now with kids, I actually kind of want it to be its separate thing. I want it to have flexibility, but at the same time, I love to be able to know, okay, I know when I'm going to be able to clock back in, I know when I'm going to have that time to sit down and look at this. And that helps me to say, it'll still be there. I can close the laptop. I know if in my project management, I left myself a note of where I left off, it's all just going to be there. And that has helped me. And I absolutely still struggle with the like, oh, I didn't get enough done today, or I really want to jump back in. But it helps to know that like, it's all going to be there when you come back.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And how you said, like, you want, before it's like, it's okay that it's all artsy and it just all flows together, but like wanting work to not be like the main thing. And when you do build your business, like whether it's before you're married even, or what, like, cause I feel like that could even be another thing that relates similarly to this of like when you're kind of doing like everything solo and then you add in another person, whether it's kids or a spouse, but like, I think that's a big thing for someone. Also in that, I want to talk real quick about childcare. So you were saying that at first for you with Clara, you had your sister helping like 2-hour chunks here and there. What has it like evolved to now with 2 kids, or even like when it was just still Clara?
Yeah. So we slowly ramped up the hours when I had Clara to, I think maybe like 12 hours during the week. And then my husband would watch her so that I could get editing done or other things. And then of course, when I was off shooting weddings. So now my schedule looks pretty different. So now I work Monday through Thursday, 8 to 1, and I'm with the kids most all other times. So Fridays are like my mom days, and I love those days. So they're taken care of in the house here. And my sister-in-law is actually our nanny. So I'm just like going through all my sisters.
I know, all the
like,
family.
yes.
That's fun. That's great.
Yeah, it's a great situation. And especially now with my son still nursing, I just feel really blessed that I'm able to be close. And it poses its own challenges being so close. I'm able now to work in this downstairs office because we had doors added. But I was working upstairs in this like little tiny room so that they couldn't see me. Yeah. And it's so hard when they see you.
Yeah, that's so true. I know my Colin's room is like right next to my office. And so I've had a few times today of like, hey, I gotta like go make sure you're in this other area so I can come out of the room.
Yeah. To get a snack, and you don't want them to see you and get upset.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And that's cool that you have had family so much helping. What would you say? So my thought, I'm going to try to form my question here. And I think some people might be wondering this as well. When you're paying family for childcare, it can sometimes feel confusing of where is the line on paid help versus, your sister or sister-in-law being like, hey, I want to just come over and hang out. Like, do you feel like you've had any weird, like boundary things or like clarity on that? Or like, has it gone well having family help in that way?
This is such a good question. And it has gone really well, I think, for us in general. It is such a good question to be like, okay, are we asking as family or are you asking as my employer? Yeah. And so we're super clear on the hours. And when I want, like, for example, I asked my brother and my sister-in-law, like, hey, can you guys watch the kids on like a random Sunday so we can go out to brunch? And I will even sometimes say, like, can you watch them as family? Or I'll say, I'm willing to pay you. So I will like put it out there. And then a lot of times she's like, it's fine. I've got them. Like, it's a random Sunday. It's 2 hours. And like, we kind of just say it. And I think sometimes it's better to not assume. So like when I worked with my sister too, the same thing. She'd be like, I just want to come over like as your sister. And like, I'm fine to help out a little bit with the kids. And like, we were just kind of forthcoming about, I'm not going to come and take over with the kids. Because sometimes I come and I take over. So I think just being really clear in your communication can help. And then also just keeping that communication open. So at first we did a trial period. Like my sister-in-law was like, yeah, like let's do just like a month and see if we both like it. So not having any pressure on family to like continue forever. So then after a month, you're like, we love you. Do you still love this? And we love you either way. Like, it's totally fine. And it worked for both parties. So we continued. So I don't know if that kind of brings some clarity to that question.
Yeah, I like that of like being very specific of if it's family help or paid help and the trial period. Because it is like if you start that and you're like, whoa, this is not working out. It's like making sure that's good in hiring in general to like be clear of like, true. If this is a long-term thing or not. I love that. So, okay, another question for you, which I know you have some great tips on this and you share stuff on your own podcast about this all the time. But moms who have businesses, we often can get really overwhelmed doing all the things and also struggle with time management. What are some ways that we can like work on that or like tips for time management and managing like the overwhelm of motherhood and business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm raising my hand along with everybody else saying like, well, this is overwhelming. I'm on the struggle bus. So I'll tell you what gets me into trouble and what leads to burnout, and that I see in my students as well. So there's 3 things. I think the first is just expecting too much of our brains and of ourselves. So our brains are meant to come up with ideas and process things and have creative solutions, but not to store things. And we are awful at remembering things. We are less creative and less effective when we try to store like our entire grocery list in our brain and remember everything that needs to happen in our business. And this is actually from the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. So really having a central place to store your ideas, even things that you want to do 6 months from now that you cannot take action on in your business right now, but like an idea that comes to mind or a pin idea for Pinterest or something, having a central place to put all of this is a game changer. I really feel like it's like clearing the hard drive, like on your computer, and your computer is just like faster when it's not trying to run everything at once and store everything at once. So I think expecting too much of our brains is probably the first one.
Yeah.
The second pitfall that I still fall into is being unrealistic with my schedule and with commitments. So saying yes too much, not asking for help enough, creating a goal and not really outlining it and working backwards and thinking about how long that's actually going to take. So it's almost like a disconnect between our dream and our desires and our calendar. So I've tried to implement time blocking to really bring this down to like a granular level and look at my calendar and say, okay, I know we want to do a website update, but like, when is that going to happen? Instead of just kicking myself that it's still on my to-do list, it's still on my to-do list and getting frustrated. So I think that can be really eye-opening to like time block and really look at the things that you desire for your business and the goals that you have, and then look at your calendar and see if those two things add up. And sometimes you're going to have to like say no more often. And I think that has been so hard because sometimes it's like, I have to say no to like really cool stuff, but it's not in 100% alignment with what I'm doing that quarter. And so I have to be like, thank you so much, but no, I can't do this. And I think people respect you more when you can say no because you can't give it 100% either. So that's probably like a boundary thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that works against us and then leads to burnout and just feeling really like you're on the struggle bus is having these old ingrained habits working against us, things that we've been doing for years that never really got us into full trouble because we had more time, we had less responsibilities, we had less people to think about. Things like multitasking, skipping meals, and then saying yes to everything, but like little things like even not nourishing yourself absolutely have an effect on your business and your ability to make decisions. And so you find yourself in this like frenzy when you're working and you're just like task hopping and you're just not at 100%, and then the day is over and you don't even know what happened. And then I realized, okay, well, I started with a big cup of coffee and then nothing else. So like, come on, Joy. Like, so sometimes it's like, it's little habits that kind of stack up that I find are working against me. So I think a step forward from this is just identifying any of these things that might be happening for you. And then not so that we can be shaming ourselves or guilting ourselves or saying shoulds, like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that, I shouldn't be doing that, but really just so that we can see it and try to make small changes to do better. Because I think so often, I don't know if this is like a mom thing or a woman thing, but like, we say a lot of like, I should, like, I should be doing this and I shouldn't be doing that. And I think that like the faster that we can just be like, I struggle with that, but I'm working on it. It's all about like the language around how you talk about yourself and these little things. But the other thing that I will say though, is that if business and motherhood feels heavy and hard, just know that like, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong or that you can't do this. I think that it is hard. So like taking a moment to like make space for that a little bit and say like, this is a challenge. I can't do this. But just because I'm feeling this resistance and just because I'm trying to find new grooves and new patterns and work in completely new ways doesn't mean that I can't do this. So I think that that's also like a word of encouragement for anybody listening.
Yeah. And I love that. And I hope, that's so beautifully said that it's hard, but it is doable and it's worth it. And I love all those tips you just shared about, expecting too much, that can be unrealistic with our schedule, all the multitasking. I love that. And on the thought of like, it is such a big adjustment. And it's something too, for any women listening who are like wanting to prepare themselves for like becoming a mom, like maybe they're expecting and they're like, okay, or expecting number two or whatever it is and trying to prepare. It's like so hard to like it's like you just have to do it almost. I feel that way about even like breastfeeding. That was a big thing. I read a book on breastfeeding. I read the Ina May's Guide to Breastfeeding or whatever it's called.
I love her.
I do too. Her. Yeah. I read both of her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read that though. And it was like, I forgot everything. I was like, wait, did I even read that? I did read it while I was pregnant, but now I'm like, I don't remember anything about this.
Yes.
And so it was like, you learn through the experience of it, but you're right. It's like,
yes,
it might be overwhelming at times. It probably will be overwhelming, but it's so doable and so worth it. And you'll be like a better business owner when you like as a mom. It'll make it.
100%.
Yeah. I've heard you talk, let's talk about that a little longer. Like how has like motherhood like helped you as a business owner, if that makes sense?
So that, yeah, 100%. I think like what I said a little bit before about like, it kind of forced me to step into this like new role, to get help, to think about my time differently. But it also made me go back to my why. And I know that's kind of like a cheesy thing. And sometimes, we don't want to, like when we're feeling overwhelmed, we don't want to think about like, all right, let's go back to why. Why did I start this business? But it's a really powerful exercise. And it is so important to go back to your why, because then you can make sure that you are not chasing someone else's finish line. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when I'm burnt out, it's because what I'm working towards isn't even my own goal anymore, or it's not even what I actually truly, truly want. It's not taking me closer to, more freedom or the things that I've identified are my why in this season. So I think that in that context, becoming a mom has just made me get so much deeper and feel like the heaviness of my decisions are now not just me. Like I cannot just piddle around for 8 hours and then be like, well, we blogged and we posted to social media. Like it carries more weight. But in kind of a good way, it like has made me grow up a little bit in my business, even as like a CEO.
Yeah. I can relate to that so much of like, you said back to your why of like, I felt that with making sure like after Colin was born, I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm actually building a business that like supports the life I want versus just like things that I feel like I should do because it's the obvious next step in your business. Or even things down to like being on all the different platforms. Like maybe if I was in a season where I just was like, I'm working all the time, which I haven't really ever been that season. But if I was like, you have all the time, you might be like, I'm going to do everything. But instead it's like, okay, what's my why? What's my reason here? What are my goals? I'm going to be more deliberate with all of it.
Yeah. That's such a good word. And a way of putting it is like, it just makes you more deliberate with the decisions, and it gives you a bit more blinders. Like you even talked about seeing other platforms to be on and then choosing, right now, I just don't have the bandwidth because I'm trying to do this really, really well. I can't jump over there because I have to be here. And like those decisions are weighty and hard, but I do feel like the most successful business owners I see have this ability to stay focused on what they know. Like they're staying in their lane and like not getting shiny object syndrome. And I think I've gotten a little more focused. I hope that continues. I definitely am just far less likely to just jump on something where before it might not have been to the detriment of my business. Whereas now I just don't have that luxury of time to just play around on a new social media platform. I have to stick with what's working and then be really calculated about those decisions.
Yeah, which is helpful because then you end up creating a business that fits into your life and not just like you're running after everything to like just see what happens. Yeah, I love that. One question like back on kind of like productivity and doing lots of things. Do you have any advice? And I could use your advice on this personally. So I'm like, I literally thought of this just now and wrote down like, this is something I want to ask her. But transitioning between like work mode and mom mode, like that's something I know I can like real quick share. Like, I guess what I can feel sometimes is like, sometimes you are having to go literally in and out of each. Like when you were talking about if you're working during nap time, it's like you might have been like, all right, I'm sitting down. You got maybe only a 45-minute nap and your baby woke up at the 45-minute mark and you're like, okay, now I got to get back to it. But then you're going back into work later. It's like, it can be really hard doing the in and out. And I know one way to help is obviously like, if you can have those big chunks where it's all work and then all baby, but in general, like, what do you do mentally to like help transition between the two?
This is such a real struggle. I think, so there's two things. If you have the set time, I would block off the last 15 minutes of the time and make that like a mental commute. So for me, I have like a pop-up in my calendar that's like, we have 15 minutes left in this workday. You need to wrap up your activities. So I start like leaving myself breadcrumbs of like, what was I working on? So sometimes I come back to my desk and I'm like, I don't even know who left these notes. Like, this is not even helpful. I know I left this, but it's not even helpful. So one book, a tip from the book, the David Allen book, was that like, having to-dos is not always as helpful unless it has your next action. And sometimes we get stuck on something if it doesn't have the next action. And that can get you out of feeling stuck. So I leave myself in those last 15 minutes a next action of we're waiting to hear back from this person, or the next action is going to be send an email to this person, so that like it takes my head out of it. But if you don't have the dedicated time, and it's like a nap, that's a great example. If I find myself struggling of like, okay, my baby is crying on the monitor, I have to go up. I will throw the kids in the car or in the stroller and give myself like a 10-minute wind down where I'm like, I can sit here and wrap up my final thought, or I can Voxer one of my students, or I can close that loop, whatever that mental loop is that feels like it's open. Try like even to just get yourself like 5 minutes to close the loop, whether you're just like singing to the kids, or sometimes I know in your podcast, you talked about how you use this like transitional time before your son's nap to like play, and you're thinking like, what am I going to be doing? And I think carving out those transitional times has been really helpful. And like, if I can't do the walks, like the weather is crazy, I will put them in the car and just like drive to Starbucks, and I'll just be blasting like Daniel Tiger music. And I'm like, all right, where are we at? Like, let me feel like I've gotten somewhere. Like, what am I going to do next? And how can I do that? And then once I'm sitting in the drive-through, I can go into Notion on my phone, which is my project management tool, and just leave myself some notes. And I think just the act of, or scribble it down on a notepad, but like leave yourself a breadcrumb of where you left off. Cause I think it's the mental loop, like being open, that sometimes feels very unsettling, or like you are left without this feeling of like, I did something, like it's not satisfactory, I guess. So those are just a couple things that have helped me for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And I need to do that 15-minute concept, because I've often been like, literally, it's like Adam's being like, hey, dinner's ready, come down. I'm like, okay, hang on, I'm coming. And then I just leave. And it's just like, you're straight into it. And then you're like, whoa, my head is like, I'm not ready to be like, because we don't have commutes, which is like, that's my, I mean, some people might listening, but generally speaking, a lot of us like, yeah, your commute is like walking down the stairs or across the room. And it is nice to have that break.
Yes. And if I can, I will incorporate like a walk into like the start or the end of my workday. So like while my childcare is still here, I will put on my headphones and just walk for like 15 minutes. That helps me so much, because normally I would want to take a walk, but sometimes like one or both of my kids is asleep. And so that has been such an adjustment to not be able to just like, you leave your house at the drop of a hat, or go for a walk because your child is asleep. So it's like learning to figure out like what works for you, what works for your brain, but also what works for your child's schedule. It's a lifelong process. We're learning. We're going to make it work.
Yeah. One thing I found helpful lately that I do sometimes, and I feel helpful when I do it, I don't do it every time. Like my example just now, dinner being ready, me being like, hang on, but closing my laptop and saying like, done. Like out loud. I found that helpful. I heard someone share that. Maybe it was a book or a podcast episode. I can't remember, but of like literally shutting down your workday by like, which some people, I use a laptop, still not a like monitor, but like being able to like literally shut it down, turn it off, whatever, like the thing is, close the notebook, and kind of like declaring it done. Yeah, it helps mentally, I think, because otherwise it could kind of be like, are you going to go back up to your office and do a little bit more? Or are you saying like you're done for the night?
It's like clocking out. Like, I feel like when I started working in high school, I had to like punch in and out. And that is like this, like, okay, I'm done. I'm getting in my car and I'm leaving. I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I love all these tips. I want to talk, I have two big like things I want to talk about still. So first, Call to Both is the name of your podcast, which I love the saying called to both. Like I remember when you first launched your podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, that feels like so speaking to me, especially like your podcast released when I was pretty early postpartum, I feel like. And so it was like, oh my gosh, I'm like starting to think about diving back in, and I'm excited by this concept. But what would you say like it means to you when we talk about being called to both business and motherhood, and like, how do we cultivate both the callings to both well?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Like the name Called to Both just kept coming up for me after having Clara. And I felt almost at war with myself for wanting both. And I bought the domain name not really knowing what it would be. Like I just felt like I want this. I see it's available.
Domain name was available?
it was available, the .com
Interesting.
domain name. And so I felt like it was meant to be. So I just
Yeah.
bought it. And that was like years before I realized, okay, I think this could be a podcast. And that's what it became. But yeah, to me, called to both means that we're allowed to be more than one thing and that we can be more than one thing well. And we can do both with intention. I just believe that God created us to be multifaceted humans. So called to both means like you don't have to choose between business and motherhood. And it is not an either or, it's a both. And I think this year, after starting the podcast, especially the word both has just become like my word of the year. Like without me thinking that in January, it definitely has just been this theme that just keeps reappearing in my life, that sometimes things, they're allowed to be both. And I guess that's the whole concept that I'm exploring on the podcast.
I love that. Yeah. And it's true that we are meant to be like multifaceted. I think that's the term you used. And like, yeah, doing a lot of things. I love that. With that as well, thinking about like the term balance in motherhood, of how we often say like balancing work-life balance, or motherhood and work balance. Like if we are feeling like I'd be curious to your thoughts on like using the term balance in general, but like if we are seeking that, like what are some like encouragement you could have if we're feeling like work is too heavy or motherhood's too heavy and I can't work, like what would you kind of advise or say?
Yeah, I don't even love that word, but sometimes I feel like there's no other word that
Yeah.
encompasses like what I'm trying to get across. And I think that we have to remember that like sometimes when we say balance, we're picturing this like old scale, this like antiquated scale that has like even weight on both sides. But I think of balance as like a plate. Like your plate can be full of many things, and like maybe like you have a little sliver here. It doesn't have to be as big as the other piece of the pie, and you can have different sizes at different times. And I think your season is going to expand in certain areas. Like when you are newly postpartum, it's not unbalanced for you to be all about that baby and all about breastfeeding a million times a day. That is just what that season calls for. And so my sister-in-law was saying that she heard this really cool talk about balance, and it's almost like being on a bicycle and you're never 100% straight. You're always leaning like one to the other. So it's just about doing those things back and forth and saying like, okay, we're going to be a little bit more work, and then we're going to be a little bit more mom, and then I'm going to be a little bit more friend and daughter, and then I'm going to be a wife. And then it's like you're balancing in that regard and not so much about everything being equal.
I love that. I like the bicycle concept. I haven't
Isn't that
heard that.
cool?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a good way to put it. I love that. So, okay, before I get into rapid fire questions with you, I guess one question I want to like just ask of like a word of encouragement, if you have, like, I know this whole podcast has been encouraging, but like if there is something that you're like a word to like something to say for a mom listening who is like, the motherhood and business thing feels like it's not working out for her right now, which I've definitely felt that already in this first year. So like, it's very normal if you do feel that way. It's tough, and it's tough going back and forth, but like any encouragement, like last encouragement words you'd say.
Yeah, I would say you're not in a race. I don't know if there's any Enneagram threes listening, but just ambitious women in general can put so much self-imposed pressure to achieve and get there quickly, and just to have these like big outcomes and big numbers. And I noticed this in myself. I felt like I'm in a race that like I don't even remember when someone said go. And I'm just like running around, and then I realized I get to set the pace and I get to determine what success looks like for my business. And so that's been something that's like really been on my heart. I like literally had it like written down. I was like, you're not in a race. Like it's okay. And the other thing was that a friend of mine just spoke this over me the other day. And she was like, you have to give yourself grace because your children are growing up and so are you. Like you're growing up. And I think we think of growing up as like something that happens until you're 18. And then it's like, okay, you're an adult, go do it. But it's such a lifelong process. Like we're still watching our parents grow up, which is a crazy concept. So I think just like the race thing, like just check out of the race.
Yeah.
Be done with it.
Yeah, I love that. You're not in a race. You set the pace. That's even a little rhyme if you say those two together.
Yes.
But you didn't say that those exactly together. But yeah, I love that. And I like the little rhyme there as well. And I think too, like that's something, it's a great reminder for me. And I've needed that reminder many times in this first year of motherhood. And I think something too that can help you remember that you're not in a race and setting your own pace in your business is sometimes choosing to be off social media and things like that. Like
Yeah.
maybe I know, gosh, early on breastfeeding, you're doing, like we've said a lot, or even later breastfeeding still, it's like you're on your phone often and it can just be
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to like let these stories play and just consume and consume. And that can be so like detrimental to our minds without us even realizing it. So that would be like additional tip I would add on what you just said of like maybe on your phone while you're breastfeeding or other times, like see if there's something else you can kind of do instead of just Instagram.
I 1000% agree because I've noticed that that makes me feel behind when I see a lot of content that others create. As a creator, as a content creator, I just feel behind and like you're left feeling less than. And it just started with a little bit of boredom and then you feel awful about your own business. So that's a great tip.
Yeah. It's hard. And I found myself a lot lately just being like, I'm going to be off Instagram on the consumption side, especially, but even some on the posting to like help with that of like, I don't want to just find myself scrolling and not really even knowing what I'm doing with it. And I've been reading on my phone when I breastfeed. I found that to, bring up your Kindle app and maybe try reading something.
I love that. Yeah. Or sometimes I'll just reach out to someone that I haven't texted in a while.
Yeah.
And I think that's so much better for my mental health is to like make a connection or like check and see how a family member is doing versus having people just like bombard me with whatever message fits their business or their life.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you. This has been so helpful for me and encouraging for me, and I'm sure for people listening. I have some rapid fire questions, which we're kind of moving like, gosh, okay. So first, let me just say for everyone, we only talked about motherhood just now, but like you have so much to offer on the business side. Actually, when I was like asking you to come on, it was like, do I ask her to talk about motherhood or do I ask her to talk about business? So we've stuck to motherhood here, but we'll probably do another episode where we go
I would love
business.
that.
But I do have some business questions for rapid fire questions.
I love it.
So one, like I know your podcast is newer, but like you said early on, like you've done YouTube for a long time and they are so similar but so different. What would you say, like which one's your favorite? And like how has it been different, like doing each? For someone maybe considering like, do I want to do podcasting or YouTube?
This is like asking me to pick a favorite child because I love them for different reasons. YouTube is my firstborn. I owe so much of my business to that platform and it's incredible. And podcasting is like this new thing. It's like my new baby. If I had to choose, I guess I would say podcasting right now because it's fresh and it's fun and it's easier. It's just a simpler medium in terms of it just being audio and it's just less post-production as well. So on both ends, it's easier for me to get out of my own head. It takes a little less outlining and planning and setting up lights and mics and all kinds of stuff. And I can just sit down and, have like wet hair from the shower and hit record. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, that's so different. Yeah. Have you thought about putting your podcast episodes on YouTube?
I have, but I'll be honest, I don't know how to be like on camera and be looking at the camera while also speaking when I'm in a solo episode.
Yeah.
It's still so new. Like we only have like 20 something episodes up. So I think I'm hoping that I'll get to the point where it's like seamless, but they're also somewhat different audiences. So there might be some topics where I will just double up and then there's some that I won't, but I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. You definitely, which again is something we could talk about another time, but like you have the different audience thing, which is hard. I know that life as well.
It's tricky.
It is very tricky, but yeah, I can see that how like, your YouTube audience might be different. And I'm with you. It's hard. I've thought about putting like recording myself doing solo episodes. My thought is like, who wants to watch me talk solo, but I get people do it though. Plenty of people are doing podcasts on YouTube and all that. So it's like someone wants to do that.
They definitely do. And YouTube is such a powerful search engine that it's
Yeah.
like free views. And I mean, it would be amazing. And it also kind of helps like on the blogging side of things too, because Google and YouTube are like besties and they love a blog post that has a YouTube video. So it's a win-win for you, but it's absolutely another layer to think about.
Yeah. I've thought about starting to put interviews just straight up on.
Yeah.
So maybe, who knows, maybe this one will be my YouTube debut.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So next one, an unpopular opinion you have about business. You can go photography business, online business, just maybe an unpopular opinion that you have.
This is a good question. I think, and this especially shows up in photography, but it's probably pretty universal. I do not think that it's the most talented or creative business owners that win. I know so many talented photographers, so many photographers that were so much better than me. And it didn't mean that they were booking. I think the business owners that win are the most consistent and that lean hard into content marketing.
Oh, literally agree with that so much. I actually say that in my course, Booked Out Designer, that like, the best designer, it's about, like if you be able to sell and market, and that's how, versus being like literally the greatest artist ever. Yeah. I totally agree with that one. Okay. What's a book or resource on motherhood that's impacted your life, or even your business life?
So I love podcasts, and there's a couple podcasts that have really spoken to me in my motherhood journey. One of them is Risen Motherhood podcast.
I love that podcast so much.
So good. Yes. On the business side, the Boss Mom podcast has been really cool. And then one book, it's not necessarily about motherhood, but it's called The Artist's Way. And I am just a huge, huge fan of this book. It's kind of like a course that you go through. It's like, I think it's a 12-week course, and it's all about cultivating your own creativity, which I think when you become a mom, and as a mom, it can be easy to like lose a sense of self a little bit, and then you come back to it. And this book just really helped me dive back into like, what do I love? And like, what do I want? And what makes me happy? What brings me joy? And it's really cool. Like there's so many journal prompts, and it has gotten me back into journaling, which I like never made time for before. And now I just like swear by it, especially like starting my workday. I have to like journal and clear my head. And I never look back at my journals. Like it's a hot mess, but it's helpful for my brain. And yeah, that book, I cannot say enough good things about it. And there's another book called Walking in This World. That's like the second like edition, I guess, of the next step in that journey. And I'm only a couple chapters in, but now I'm doing like the walks because that's a part of it. And that's been so good too. So I'm just like, I'm a huge fan.
You're making me want to read that. So I started that book ages ago and never finished it. But that's the book that talks about the concept of morning pages, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, that is the book I started. I need to finish it. You just gave a great pitch for it. Like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
What do you journal when you start your work day?
So it's kind of a mix between like, for the first couple pages, I do like morning pages where it's just stream of consciousness journaling. And it's really just like clearing out every thought or cobweb in your brain. But then also a lot of times I notice in my pages, I end up moving to like business. And so I've been thinking through a lot of like mindset blocks, like blocks around time and not having enough time, or just anything, mindset blocks on money, on like what I can and can't do in my business. And it's as you journal, you'll just like things kind of just like fall out on the page. And you're like, what's that? Like, that's not real. Like if my student told me that, I'd tell them that's not real. And then you kind of get into it. And so that's kind of what's been coming up for me, but it's like every day it's different. And sometimes it's like, here's what I did today. And other times it's like a business marketing idea.
Yeah, I love that. How much time do you spend journaling when you like start the workday?
Maybe like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Like it's just a quick, like, I'm just going to fill a couple pages. It's so sloppy, but it's like, it just feels clearing. And then a lot of times I'll take a couple minutes right then to think, what do I need this day? Like, what do I need to complete in order to feel like I did something? Yeah. Like if I could only do one thing, or like if tonight when I'm like giving the kids a bath, if I know that I published one thing, like what would it be? Because that can really help me to like zero in on like what I should be doing instead of like just responding to a lot of notifications.
Yeah, I might try that tomorrow. And you've encouraged me to read that book because I remember really enjoying it. I can't remember why I quit reading. I think it had to do with like it being taken back from the library or something. But yeah, that's awesome. And to echo you on Risen Motherhood, if you're a Christian like mom, it's such an incredible podcast. Like I've always feel so encouraged in my faith, and random, like really taking like how the gospel message applies to like really random aspects of like being a mom, and you learn a lot from it. I always feel so uplifted listening that I literally have probably listened to like every episode because I went back to like early episodes.
Wow.
I love that. I'm a big, like, I know you are as well, listen to podcasts, but I've really enjoyed literally just this year, discover that one, listening to
Yeah. I have not listened recently to them, but now with that question, I'm like, oh, I need to go back and check them out because like you said, I just always feel so uplifted with every one of their episodes. And like, that's what we need as moms. Like you just, Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Well, tell everyone listening where they can find you and connect with you and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I am Joy Michelle on Instagram. My website is joymichelle.co. That's CO. I share lots of motherhood and business content over on my podcast called To Both. And if you're a photographer listening, I'd love to have you join me in the Photo Boss Facebook group. I share tons of freebies and guides and videos about success as a photographer.
Yeah, you have so many great resources for photographers. I know there are definitely photographers listening, so you guys need to check that out.
Awesome.
Yes. Well, this was amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. This was amazing.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravey.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravey.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.